Good evening. In the last hour, senior councillors have approved a fresh round of multi-million-pound budget cuts. The decision to cut £123 million over 5 years from Wolverhampton Council's budget was described by its leader as unpalatable and unacceptable. In a moment, I'll be talking to a senior Labour councillor in Wolverhampton and also the city's only Conservative MP. But first, Sarah Falkland's been gauging opinion in the city.
They want to cut, and they sit down there, they want to get up and walk.
I just think it's disgusting, really.
Just why? Why have you got to cut everything?
There's anger on the streets of Whitmarines in Wolverhampton. Council cuts of £123 million are on their way.
Unemployment here is more than double the national average, and over 10% of households are single parents.
Peter Walker is one of them. He says the cuts have gone too far.
We all need a bit of help at this moment in time. It's a bit too much, especially, like I said, no one's got any work. If we had work, it wouldn't be so bad.
Sandra Grimm uses the library here twice a week. Under the current proposals, though, the opening hours will be reduced from just over 50 hours a week to 15.
What they think and what is put in practice are two different things. You can't cut people down that have been used to access to things and saying, oh, you can only have so many hours a week.
Over at the Lighthouse Centre, they've learnt to cope with cuts. A vinyl night is one of the many attractions here, apart from the draw of the cinemas. They've had to be proactive, especially as the council's withdrawing half their grant and could now shut them out altogether.
We've been working from hand to mouth for a few years now in terms of budget cuts and building our audiences to fill that gap. We just don't know until we're told formally, and it is a worry.
Back in Whitmarines, pensioners Ezra and Silver Ricketts are beginning to wonder what they're getting for their council tax. The authorities now warning that even collecting the rubbish could be a struggle.
Us personally, not a lot.
Not a lot.
Because the only facilities we really get is dustbins being emptied. So,
And they're saying they might be struggling to give you that.
well,
Now, if they do that,
the thing is, what they're doing with the money that they're getting.
And the council would say that's the problem. The government's not giving them enough. Sarah Falkland, BBC Midlands Today in Wolverhampton.
Well, live now to Wolverhampton, Councillor Andrew Johnson. Good evening. Appreciate you just coming out of the meeting that's recently finished. How are you going to save this money?
Well, we've taken a very difficult decision tonight to make even more cuts over and above those that we've already been forced to make because of the incredible reduction in our government grant. Basically, we've lost over half of the grant that the government gives us for council services between 2010 and 2015-16. And that is a huge cut. I mean, we have to take out £123 million over the next 5 years out of the council's budget, which is virtually impossible.
Virtually impossible, but you have to do it. So what effect will this have on the people of Wolverhampton and the city itself?
It's already having a very dire effect. It is not something that we want to do, and I can completely empathise with the frustration of the people you've interviewed today about the cutbacks. We've already had announcements about libraries having much shorter hours, but it's going to affect every part of the council's service. We simply can't make cuts of this magnitude without having service reductions which will impact on the public.
Will anything be ring-fenced? Will anything be protected?
Well, we will obviously protect the statutory services that we have to provide. So, for example, we spend a great deal of money on looked after children, as is absolutely necessarily and morally right. So we'll have to protect those elements of the service. Basically, in order to make cuts of this magnitude, every part of what the council does will be affected.
But do you affect that one politician's cuts is another politician's savings? There is a huge national deficit. Cuts are being made right across the country, not just at Wolverhampton City Council.
Yes, but Wolverhampton City Council has faced worse cuts than many other councils that serve far wealthier areas of the country, and also the local government sector has faced bigger cuts than any other government department. This is really unfair on the people we represent.
OK, Councillor Andrew Johnson, thank you. Well, Wolverhampton South West MP Paul, our Westminster studio now. Good evening.
Good evening.
Just to pick up on that last point, this is really unfair on Wolverhampton. How do you respond to that?
Well, as in everything in life, Mary, there's two sides to the story. Councillor Johnson there was just talking about the expenditure and how it's the fault of central government. But if you actually look at Wolverhampton Council's own figures, their current day-to-day spending is about £250 million. What they're projecting to spend over the next 5 to 6 years is £312 million. That's an increase of 25%. The reason these figures look so bad is because no other government department and no other body that I'm aware of is actually looking to increase spending over the next 5 to 6 years. If anything, they're just basically looking to stand still. That's what's making the figures look incredibly bad.
So are you saying that the councillors are crying wolf? I mean, £123 million over the next 5 years. They're saying it's going to have a real impact on services, all but the absolutely essential services. Are you saying that that's just simply not true?
I think you can present the figures and you can present the statistics in a certain way. And I think it's important that everybody who's watching this today and everybody who's a Wolverhampton resident gets the full facts and a real sense of what the real figures are.
Well, talking about the residents, you will have heard that the main picture, there was one word that kept coming up time and time again from your constituents: why? Why does this money have to be cut, or saved, as you would put it?
A simple fact I would put out there, Mary, and it isn't often publicised a lot, and I'm sorry Councillor Johnson didn't refer to it. Wolverhampton City Council actually have debts of over £500 million. The interest on that debt is £25 million a year. That actually is the saving that the council are looking to do. And actually, what makes it slightly worse than that, they're actually looking to borrow an additional £75 million this year. When you look at that whole debt bombshell, for every household in Wolverhampton, that is a cost of £5,000 around every household in the city.
But just broadening this out, we're not just talking about Wolverhampton here. There's some very, very large cuts, savings that have to be made in various areas of the West Midlands. Birmingham, a total of £840 million, £109 million in Staffordshire. What are you doing to make sure that the West Midlands gets a fair deal?
Well, one thing I've been doing, David Cameron, the Prime Minister, came to Wolverhampton just a few months ago, and he spoke very candidly about how we have to survive in the future. And I think that's important. In the 21st century, it's not just government, it's not just local government, but every household is going to have to live within its means. And the reality is we can't shirk that responsibility. That's something we're going to have to face head on.
OK, Paul Apple, thank you. Now, coming up later in the programme...